Hello, third graders. Today we are talking about making connections. We are learning to make connections to the story. And you'll know that you have accomplished this when you can say, I can think about the story and share how it relates to my life, my memories, the world, or other books. Connections are the puzzle pieces to help us understand what we are reading. When we are able to connect with a book, we're able to understand the characters better and to understand what is going on, and that makes us a better reader. There are 3 ways to make a connection. The first one is text to self. When I say text, I don't mean a message on a phone. I mean a book, a story, maybe a magazine, or an article. Anything that you can read, that is the text that I mean. So when you're able to connect a story to yourself, we call that a text to self connection. When you're able to connect one book to another book, or maybe a book to a magazine or something like that, we call it a text to text connection. So you can see the 2 books there. The last one is text to world. So sometimes we read a part of a book and that reminds us of something not in our own life and not in another book, but something that we've seen in the world, and that's a text to world connection. Text to self connection is a personal connection that a reader makes between a book or other reading material and their own experiences. An example is if I read a passage and then I said, this story reminds me of a vacation we took this summer to Florida. To make a text to self connection, you might ask questions like, what does this remind me of in my own life? What is similar about this? How is this similar to my life? How is it different than my life? Has something like this ever happened to me? How does this relate to my life? What were my feelings when I read this? So those are ways that you can connect to the text that you are reading. You might read about a character and it would remind you of yourself, or read about a place that you have visited before, and it helps you to connect to the story. A text-to-text connection is when a book reminds you of other things you've read, other books by the same author maybe, or stories from a similar genre. An example is, this character has the same problem that I read about in the story last week. To make a text-to-text connection, you might ask yourself, what does this remind me of in another book I've read? How is this text similar to other things I've read? When a text reminds you of something happening or something that has happened in the world, even in your community, this is a text to world connection. An example would be, I heard about something similar to what happened in this text when I was watching the news last night. You might ask yourself, what does this remind me of in the real world? How is this text similar to things that happen in the real world? How did that part relate to the world around me? Let's make connections. Here is a picture from the book that we read a couple weeks ago called Grandma's Records. So we can see in this, we can see in the illustrations and the words say, the next day, Grandma and I spent all day shopping for clothes to wear to the show. She even made me get a haircut. Here the little boy is getting ready for a special event by shopping and getting a haircut. You can connect this to your own life by thinking about how you get ready for something special. I connect this book to myself because when I get ready for a special event, I pick out a new dress and shoes. So I feel like it's similar to what the little boy is doing because he is also getting new clothes and making himself look nice for the event. Here you can see me dressing up like Cinderella. Here, the little boy is arriving at his grandmother's house. He gives her a big hug. I can make a text-to-text connection by connecting this to another book. I'm thinking about another character arriving at his grandmother's house and giving her a big hug. What book does this remind you of? Of another little boy arriving to his grandmother's house and giving her a big hug. I connect this book to Saturdays and Tea Cakes because when he arrives to his grandmother's house, he gives her a big hug. And I love how these pictures look almost identical. You can see both the grandmas are hugging them and smiling, and the boys look happy. Now we're going to make a text to world connection. Here's another illustration from Grandma's Records. Here is the theater that they went to for the concert. I can connect this to the world by thinking of another place in the world that might look like this. What place does this remind you of? Can you think of a place in Athens? I connected this book to the world because it reminded me of the Georgia Theater, which is in Athens. I've seen it in real life, and the lights that are on the front of the theater and the big block letters reminded me of the theater in Grandma's Records. Now it's your turn. I want you to make connections. Think back to the story in My Mama's Kitchen, or maybe another book if that's easier for you. In the book, the ants all come into the kitchen with bags of vegetables and ingredients for soup. Can you make one connection to this? You might have a personal connection, that would be text to self. You might have a connection to another book, that would be text to text, or a connection to the world, that would be text to world. I want you to type your answer in the chat box to share. Wait until your teacher asks you to hit enter by telling you their special word. Here I've given you some sentence frames that you can use. So for a text to self connection, you might say, I connect this book to myself because it reminds me of when I blank. Or if you wanted to do a text to text connection, I connect this book to, and then you would put the other title of the book here, because it reminds me of when they, you might name your character, when they ... Or a text to world connection. I connect this book to something in the world. You would tell me what it is. I connect this book to blank because it reminds me of blank. Okay? I look forward to hearing your connections.